Okay, and great. Well, we got another great week of conversation
Recording
here
in progress.
with Account-Based Fridays, and a terrific guest joining us today, Zoe Hartsfield, coming from Spekit. And we're going to ask Zoe to introduce herself in a moment. But for those of you who don't know Spekit, they have been on fire. In the last 2 years have grown by 5x in and around the online training area and arena. And the specific use case that intrigued me when I met Zoe a few weeks ago was their primary use case of sales, RevOps, sales enablement training, and also her panel about the different generations of kind of the learning styles and approaches. But more importantly, what she has done as a community leader at Spekit, I thought was really intriguing. So I'm really excited to dig in. And in fact, this week, our poll is in and around the training aspect. And the poll is still live, so we only have a few votes currently. But the question or the reason this question came up is I've noticed a number of enterprises struggling with kind of the post-ABM adoption. They're going through a lot of the process of buying the tool sets. They're training their sales team once, and marketers are starting to get in a bit of a finger-pointing situation of why isn't sales following up on my accounts? And then sales is kind of pointing the finger back at marketing saying, this stuff isn't working. And so it felt a little bit like the older school of sales and marketing alignment that we've been working on for 20 years. So that's what prompted this question. Was I really wanted to see, how people felt. Was it a sales enablement issue? Was it a training issue? And although the votes are few, the majority kind of said, hey, there's definitely an opportunity here for sales enablement. Now, in fairness, sales enablement's got to be a really challenging job right now with the remote workers, and a lot of these tool sets are really designed for the sales organization, and maybe one or two marketers have to understand it. And sales teams have very limited time to synthesize new tools or new learning. So it's a really hard role. But I don't know, Megan, did you have any point of view on this particular poll this week?
I mean, I'm not surprised, right? I think we all know that this kind of last mile of making sure that your reps are, to quote one of my former Sirius colleagues, competent and confident in what they're supposed to be doing, is really hard, and when I, think back to interviews I've done with sort of folks post getting help from consultants, one of the things they always said is change management is really the hard part. The recommendation for what the process should be is just the tip of the iceberg. The hard thing is getting people to adopt it. And that's why, excited to have Zoe, you here today to talk about some of the things that you're seeing that deliver that success. Because really, unless somebody's actually doing what they should be doing in a way that is effective, you're likely throwing a lot of money out the window, both on consulting and tools and anything else you're investing in. So thank you for joining us today, and definitely excited to learn from you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. You both said things that just my wheels are spinning right now. You mentioned training once, and that just it grinds my gears, because the reality is we are battling a forgetting curve, right? Nobody remembers 100% of that 4-hour change management training. No. We forget it probably by the next day. We probably forget 90% of it by the next week. So really, we at Spekit as an ethos believe that the way we learn at work is broken. It's based on a training model that came about in the 90s, back when PowerPoint was really popping off. So when I was an infant, the way that we train at work was designed, and we've just kept it. And so we really need to kind of adjust the way that we're approaching this whole learning at work. And that's where Spekit came in and was we need just-in-time enablement. We need right-on-time enablement, a platform purpose-built for how we actually learn today, especially as people in Gen Z and millennials are becoming 50, 60, 70% of the buyer persona, and only going to take more of that. And then, oh my goodness, Gen Alpha is going to come in and everything's going to change again. So the only constant is change, making sure that we are constantly reinforcing that training. And to your point, Megan, ABM is an expensive strategy to leave on the table. And when I think about enablement as sort of this bridge between rep and resource, when I think about ABM as this hyper relevant, really specific for accounts, resource heavy motion, like you need enablement to be in lockstep with marketing, specifically ABM, to make sure that marketing and sales are on the same page and aligned on the strategy. Otherwise, yeah, it's just dollars out the door for no reason. So I think ABM resources often go under or completely unutilized. And it's really because of a lack of awareness and a lack of training. So if you can create that training in bite-sized pieces that's delivered in the moment, I think you're going to have a lot more success and a lot more utilization of those ABM resources over time.
Zoe, do you think training is the right word? Seems to me like it's almost an old-fashioned word that we.
I think your mic is standing up. I can't quite hear you. So sorry.
I probably got the wrong mic set up.
There we go.
Do you think training is an old-fashioned word? I mean, you're using the word training maybe to help everybody understand the basic category, but it almost feels like, to me, it feels like for my kids, that they learn by doing. They don't get trained and then do. They want to do right away. They don't want to wait.
Yeah, it's almost like practicing, like getting to, because 70%, there's a statistic, and I'll have to find the resource where that's pulled from, but it's suggested that 70% of learning, or like learning your job function, happens on the job. So many people are kinetic learners. They learn by doing, to your point, by practicing the motion of the actual work itself. And so the fact that we like have, what we're calling training exist in a silo outside of the job, and then we're like, go forth and do, but we're battling that forgetting curve. It's like, all right, well, now I've lost it and I have to relearn this so it's really learning. Maybe it's not training, it's like learning. It's how we actually learn today. And so that's why, Spekit as a product is designed for micro learning in the flow of work. So that information is delivered to you. And then we actually have parts of our product that we call it knowledge checks that reinforce that learning in the moment of learning. So as you're on the job, as you're doing the thing, we're checking that knowledge. We're reinforcing it to battle that forgetting curve, to kind of like lessen that slope and make sure that you are reinforcing the things that you've learned to help you. You mentioned, what was it? Competency and what was the one, Megan?
Oh, I muted myself. Confidence and competence.
Okay, so we call it enablement and empowerment. Same concept, right? Like we want our reps to feel enabled and empowered in their job so that they can go forth and do their best work at work. And so it's that idea of, can we help people learn the way that they actually learn, and in the moment of learning, in the moment where it's most relevant, because that's what's going to make it stick. If you teach me a math problem with no actual context or like relevancy to my life, I'm probably going to forget it. I was great at calculus in college. If you told me I needed to do a problem today, would never. I haven't used it. I lost it. My husband, on the other hand, behind me, kind of see him working in CAD back then. He's a mechanical engineer. He uses those skills all of the time. So he could do a problem for you today. But if you don't use it, you lose it. And so how do we create environments where people are able to use the information that they're learning repeatedly, immediately after learning it, so that it sticks? And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think in the context of ABM, when you're creating these hyper relevant resources, there's a lot of like internal selling that needs to happen. You need to pitch it to the rep. What's in it for me? Why is this relevant to me? Because otherwise they're not going to pay attention to it. I was a rep once upon a time. If something did not correlate in my brain that this is going to help me hit my quota, this is going to help me get paid, it was in one ear and out the other. I wish I was like better than that, but I'm not. And so I think when you are looking at salespeople who have an incredibly demanding grind of a job, you have to sell that what's in it for me. And so when it comes to ABM, this very, very expensive but high impact motion, you just have to be really good about continuously reinforcing the value. This is what's in it for you. This is how it's going to help you close this big account that's going to get you to your number. And then making sure that the resources are clear and delivered with the enablement and training and information, so that they understand exactly how to use it, when and where to use it, and it is accessible to them in the moment when they might need it.
I've got a question for you, Zoe. In terms of your day-to-day responsibilities, it sounded like you ran the community side of Spekit, and I'd be curious to learn, what does that involve? And I guess a second follow-on question is, if you've seen any recent trends with training sales or sales enablement, whether it's ABM or anything, like any tips or advice or trends that you're seeing there as part of that community, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so my day-to-day is sort of bridging the gap between like the overall enablement community and my team. And so that functions in a couple different ways because everybody internally has different goals. Sales wants leads, marketing wants content and to be able to test messaging from like a product marketing perspective. CS wants, customer to customer education. And so it's like, how do you facilitate all of those conversations in one spot? It's really helping them, if I have my ear to the ground in the enablement community, to spot trends, to start conversations, to create relationships so that we can have feedback loops. So that's a lot of what I do in my day-to-day. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's also very, very fun because I get to work really cross-functionally with a lot of different teams. And as far as trends go, the number one trend that I have heard in recent weeks, and I recently held a panel with, it was about 50% our customers, 50% not our customers, but all our ideal buyer persona. We got everybody together in a room, no pitch, no sell. We tested some messaging and we asked a couple of questions. And I asked them, what are you seeing in the market today? What's like the biggest thing being asked of you by your CRO, by your CEO? And the number one thing I heard was the shift from growth at all costs to profitability. So we're seeing in this market where, VCs are kind of pulling back some of those big numbers that they were throwing out 6 months ago as the economy is sort of shaky. And I know it's like so cliche, but these uncertain times, people are being asked to defend their tech stack and really to reduce their tech stack. So what is going to take us from this growth at all cost mindset, churn and burn, let's just like get dollars in the door, it doesn't matter how many dollars it costs us, to how do we shift to being more profitable or like closer to that profitability mark? So that's a lot of what I'm hearing, which is no small task. Unfortunately, some people are going from a really, really high burn rate to, oh, now I need to be profitable as soon as possible. What the heck? Like, it's not totally feasible for everybody in a reasonable time frame. But when people are being asked to reduce their tech stack in the name of that goal, how do you justify the spend of a tool? How do you make sure that the incumbent stays and isn't abandoned for a Google spreadsheet? And that's really what we're seeing in the market right now.
Okay, in that environment, let's say we're going to swap out our learning platform for Spekit, but we have all these assets built for old-fashioned learning. What are you guys doing about that transition?
Yeah, so we are super fortunate to have, in my opinion, and maybe this counts for nothing and maybe it counts for everything, the most elite enablement as a service team who helps teams transition all of that stuff. Because we are asking people to think about learning at work differently. You're going from a CMS or an LMS, that content is not built to be delivered in bite-sized pieces to your reps in the moment of learning. So we have some of the best enablement and learning and development experts on our team. Andrea Rist, who heads up that team, is phenomenal. She's one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She has dedicated her career to understanding the way people learn at work. And so her team literally is designated to help teams transfer that content over into this new bite-sized way of learning. It would be unfair and honestly not set people up for success to just be like, here's a platform, good luck, if we're asking you to fundamentally change the way you think about learning at work. So we have that team in place to help people who are onboarding and transitioning, as well as our CS team is pretty amazing and well-versed in that too, to help people onboard effectively and transition. Because 9 times out of 10, unless we're selling into growth accounts who are just looking at their very first learning platform, most people have an incumbent that is sort of that old way of learning, that LMS way of learning. And we're asking you to make a big shift. We're not going to ask you to do that alone. So we're going to help you based on what we know and all the research we've done about how learning is best delivered to your employees at work.
So Zoe, thinking about that, how and sort of that quest for profitability, how do you see Spekit sort of balancing the probably pretty heavy demand for a services component to that customer relationship with, sort of your own growth objectives. I'm interested in that because, you do see sometimes these more complex platforms that do require change management sort of underinvesting in that piece of it. But they're also saying, hey, we're not in the services business. We're selling, a platform. So it sounds like you guys have said, hey, we have to do this. I'm interested to know how it fits into the business model.
Yeah. So, I mean, Melanie, our CEO, has excellent vision and forethought to have brought on the services team probably right in time, like right before we desperately needed it. And to the point where for a little bit, the marketing team selfishly was like utilizing them as SMEs, because Andrea and her team are so well versed in what they do. I would hit them up for like content ideas or, oh, can we have you like speak on this? Now, we've been respectfully asked to kind of pull back on some of those requests because they're so busy helping people implement and shift content over and create content built for the Spekit platform nowadays. So it's definitely been a little bit of a shift since we brought them on, because it was so fun to have all these excellent experts on our team to hit them up for, oh, what do you think about this like webinar idea? Or like, would you want to speak on this? And now it's like, no, heads down, we are helping our customers, making them successful, which is really what everybody needs to be doing right now, like doubling down on that retention and expansion motion more so, not to say more so than acquisition. Acquisition is important as well, but that's another trend we're hearing in the market is retention is the name of the game in a market like this. So really just making sure that we carve out as much time as possible for them to dedicate to our customers, to our onboarding, newest customers, and making sure that they're as successful as possible.
Can you talk about cross-system integration? You're thinking about cross-system integration, like, so you got conversation intelligence. Your sales team is learning from mistakes they're making by going back and listening to other sales calls. Do you guys already incorporate that? How are you thinking about taking that kind of information and then spinning it back into training adjustment?
Yeah. So one thing that's nice about Spekit as a tool, and I promise I'm not trying to pitch it, it's more so just like the functionality of the product itself, is you can create a spec, which is just like, a little bite-sized learning card. Think of it like a digital flashcard. From a Slack, you can create it from pretty much anywhere. So it's really nice to be able to embed training somewhere on a web-based platform, on any sort of like custom object or field, or you can create it to live in sort of this drop-down wiki that is then searchable forever. So when you have a call, when you're listening to a rep and you're like, wow, I have heard this objection for the third time today from a different rep each time, we are struggling to overcome it. Having a manager in that moment of coaching. We also as Spekit are implementing a coach in public model. So everybody is getting coaching visibly in Slack from everyone on the team. So, if Freddie is getting coaching from his manager, obviously we are always kind. We are always helpful. It's never to rip a rep apart in front of their team, but hey, Freddie had a call. This is what he could have done better. This is what he crushed. That is visible to the whole team. So everybody can learn from everyone else's mistakes, or not even mistakes, but just everyone can learn from everyone else in real time in public. And then also when that's happening in Slack, okay, this is the third time somebody has said this. We're just going to create from this Slack a new spec. So now it lives in Spekit forever. When you get this objection, you can now search it in Spekit. And I have that objection handling model that was written by my coach from that moment. And I think that helps with the change management piece as well, right? Like objections come up. We probably weren't facing the same objections 6 months ago that we are today because of the economy. So we've added to that section in our Spekit to that topic. And I think like the ability to very quickly add to your repertoire and make it searchable and make it deliverable when somebody needs it is going to be really critical as we move to this. Everybody needs to be efficient. We're trying to get to profitability. We're operating out of 18 different tools. How do we make this really, really simple and really like comes to you? You don't have to leave your flow of work to find what you need. And that's what we're trying to do. So I hope I was accurate in answering that question. I feel like I got a little rambly there.
I had just a follow-on question. Just keep an eye on time. It's probably be my last question, but and maybe John, you've got a point of view on this too. And you've kind of given us a lot of nuggets here along the way. But A common pain point that I continue to see with companies, particularly the mid-market companies, meaning they are mid-market, meaning less than $1 billion, call it, and they have aspirations to sell into the enterprise. So typically SaaS companies that have a transactional sales model that are pivoting to an account-based model, and they make all this investment in the infrastructure, meaning the tech targets and other platforms of the world. They go through the initial training, and you gave some nuggets here of, hey, it would be really helpful if you can kind of connect the training to the quota or the quota retirement. Certainly putting kind of the content in workflow would help enable that sales enablement process for marketing to train or do that change management of the account-based motion into the sales side. Are there any other tips or advice that you would give or that you've seen others do that have kind of really cracked that nut of helping their sales organizations or sales enablement be more effective in that specific account-based motion use case?
Yeah, I think it's all about that reinforcement. So instead of training once, how are we reinforcing it? And not making people sit through 3 different 3-hour trainings, but hey, here's the training. Here's a resource that you can always look back to, but then we have something called knowledge checks. So I can, as a manager, send a knowledge check to my team. It's a 3 to 4 question quiz, essentially, that'll pop up wherever they are, whenever they are, and I can send it, the day after. And I can check and see how much of this did they retain? Was the information clear? Which is also helpful for me as a leader, as a trainer, to see what's sticking, what's not sticking. Maybe this part wasn't clear enough. Maybe I need to re-hammer this, or I can look at trends too. Okay, everybody missed question 3. This part was not clear. Or, okay, so-and-so missed all of the questions. They were not paying attention during the training at all. I need to have a conversation with them. So it's really having that back-end analytics to see what is being retained and then continuously reinforcing in, again, bite-sized pieces, because we're not designed to memorize a 3-hour training. Our brains don't work like that. So if we can deliver that training in smaller chunks, if we can reinforce continuously afterwards, the odds of battling that forgetting curve successfully go way up. And it is aiding in that on-the-job training.
All right. Well, I think we are just about at time. This has been super helpful. I think, there's such an opportunity in just learning broadly, right? Whether it's academia or whether it's work. I think we're at this really interesting moment where we need to think differently about how we are helping people to learn. And I appreciate, what you're doing and how you all are thinking about what that model could be, in the workplace, because as you say, we do most of our learning on the job, and when it's ineffective, you can't really conflict. if we're not giving people the right tools in the right way, we can't expect them to make the changes that we need to help our businesses grow. So it's a great cause. Thank you for thanks for leading the charge there. John, anything you want to add before we close?
Anything on your side, John? Any other questions or comments?
I would just say that all of us seniors need to really, really listen to the different ways that our colleagues are learning and pay attention, because our goal is that people learn and use and improve, not that they use the tool that was built and designed 20 years ago.
I was a 90s infant too, and I would agree with that. So.
Love it. Thanks so much for having me on, y'all.
Zoe, really appreciate
you.
you investing